All right, thank you, everyone. We have our last panel of the day. So we have Hiroko, Markael, Sara. All right, well, thank you, everyone, so much for your attention and commitment to staying here through our last panel of the day, which will take us just to the end. Kind of ad lib for a moment before we introduce the panel. I thought a lot about the transition between the last presentation and this panel, and what are these connection points. And I'm still, I would say, conceptually, in some ways, distilling what all the connection points are, because the system is so vast. But I know that in the last component of the book, I was asked to write a conclusion, and I worked on this for a long time, and I think it's, for me, some of the salient words that connect. So the production processes that clothe the vast majority of humans today are backed by global investment capital that has been working for centuries to centralize and privatize the genetics and the machinery that undergird the fiber and dye farming systems of manufacturing. The system is clearly at an inflection point, as we're reaching a threshold for how long centralization can exist on a planet experiencing climate disruption. Current textile systems are pumping out and overproducing materials at the expense of Earth's biomes. And now it's become an economic privilege to have access to non-toxic clothing and clean food. So the obvious question arises, why are we still allowing this kind of economy to exist when it has made making healthy textile and all other choices too expensive for the vast majority of us? To transform any kind of dysfunctional relationship and ensure solutions are enacted and mistakes aren't repeated, it's essential to understand that relationship's history. I go through things that echo actually what Dominique was just describing. But one of the things that I point to here is that we need an investment strategy for the means of production to make sure that farming and ranching is viable, in that it has a way to add value, that labor on farm, labor on land has a way to take what they grow, the proceeds of their landscapes, and add value to that and sell things that have value added, and create marketplaces that directly create spaces for you as the wearer to engage with value addition. And so I brought it up in the panel or the presentation earlier in the morning, that these regional systems that we're creating, we absolutely need the means of production to be near the farms and ranches where we're producing the material for this kind of economic decentralization to work. And so this panel is about, looking at decentralization, where it's at right now in our fiber shed, and looking at the advent of certain aspects to decentralization that can move us further, which is what Hiroko is going to talk about. Even a business that's not fully developed yet, but what are the plans? And then two businesses here that have just begun their women wool mill operators we are so grateful to hear from today, who are producing the yarn, and much of the yarn you see out here is in some way, shape, or form connected to the labor and hard work of the two women sitting to the left of Hiroko, who is to my left, Markael and Sara. All right, so let's just begin. Each of you can give an introduction to your work, and then we'll go into the Q&A. All right. Hiroko?
Thank you, Rebecca.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody, for actually being here. And I want to just start by saying that the free market is not free, and it never has been. The second thing I just have to add on for Oakland, being an Oaklander, is that right now we are in the process of adding 15,000 residential units to our downtown. And we're seeing that we have 10,000 people living outside now. So there's a shift that's happening that's not about displacement, but just sheer out replacement. So I just had to put that out there to you all. Okay. So is it okay if I stand? I just feel really awkward sitting here. I think our common thread is that we're all textile artists. And for a long time, I was in the neighborhood economic development space because in design school, they didn't teach the geopolitical labor issues surrounding the industry. And so for many years, I was involved with non-government organizations and finally started a blanket company I could live with as a reluctant capitalist, is what I like to say. And so I partnered with nonprofits throughout the country wherever I sold my work, and we engaged with organizations that worked with women who were in transition and youth who were homeless, which I also have experience with. Then after growing that company, I founded a space in Oakland that was 6,000 square feet in the Arts District. It's still not officially recognized as the Art and Garage District, but I think we're getting there. And grew my company, but then at the same time started another company that was a sustainable business incubator for sewn goods companies. One of those is represented outside at COSA Arts. Elaine Hamlin is here, and so she grew out of that space and started her own beautiful space in Oakland now, too. And after 7 years of that and hosting 15 amazing artists every first Friday for, I think we did like 65, 66 First Fridays, our rent went up about 48%. And that was a low increase because in that neighborhood, my friends who also started to occupy the area there experienced 60%, 130%, 210% increases. So I'm going back to policy again, sorry, because this will be self-explanatory. Here, I'll just go to the next thing, and you can just look at it. Okay, and I'll just keep talking. But and I have, what, 4 more minutes? 2 more minutes. Okay, so where was I? Oh, yeah, so in terms of ownership, which came up, one of the policy pieces that we're working on is about cultural preservation and looking at the downtown plan and trying to preserve the authentic culture of Oakland. And we're looking at requiring like at least 50 different spaces downtown now are empty on the ground floor because all the money is upstairs in the residential units. And we're trying to require the city to create cultural easements within those spaces so that the ownership can be run by the community, you know, ideally by cultural entities, but open for everybody. And we need to get everybody out to get city council to understand that a little bit better than just taking money from developers and going to the next office. So, okay. So then my whole thing then turned towards policy advocacy, and then realizing that many years ago, I did this drawing. It's a little stretched out. But basically, I realized, you know, knowing Rebecca for a long time too, and we hosted an event for Fibershed at the Collective, that there is a lot of textile waste in this industry, even amongst the Fibershed folks that I've been talking to as well. And so maybe if I just focus on this one, it's a little bit, okay, all right. So this is something I called community-supported fashion a ways back. I think it was 2014 when I did this drawing in about 20 minutes. It's a very quick sketch. But basically, it was started as an idea of a remade-to-order facility that would have high-tech cleaning with, you know, CO2 gas. We would have laser cutting and patterns that were personalized so that basically we would have a handheld phone device that could scan Michael's body and have her measurements in our database, and she could send in her grandmother's coat, and we would restructure it for her. That was the idea, right? And so then different members, like designers could be members. They could say, you know what, we're designing mushroom leather. We would really love to have access to all the cotton flannel. And I was like, well, what would you do with that cotton flannel? And they say, we'd sprinkle the mushroom spores on it, et cetera, et cetera. So that got me thinking about doing like fiber regeneration and collecting all the waste and then shredding it and perhaps felting it and doing other, you know, material outcomes. basically just adding value to all the trash that's out there. And now I have 2 minutes left. Right now what's happening is that the collection partners we were talking about here, like St. Vincent de Paul and Goodwill, they're all closing down. Because I don't know if you know this, but in the world today, a lot of countries are rejecting our garbage. And it's happening in plastic, it's happening in textiles. And, you know, fast fashion has created this situation where, you know, in 1960, we had 1.7 million tons of textiles generated, and today we have about 16 million tons. And this is just in the US. This is how much is landfilled. We have 10 million tons landfilled, you know, in 2015. There's only 2.5 million that's recycled, and then 3 million is combusted or incinerated, and they recover some energy with it. But this little green circle I hand drew myself is showing the amount that was composted in 1960 and today. And today it's still 0. So this is where I wanted to ask later too about, you know, how the Fibershed community might be able to make use of composted, maybe their underbellies of sheep shearings or whatever it might be. And then I had a tiny thought that may or may not work with Professor Johnson's amazing microbes, where he scatters that, you know, with 1 pound per acre. Maybe it needs some kind of netting. You know, maybe that's a way to also use it more vastly. Okay, let's see. So basically, we're, you know, a recycling and fiber regeneration company, and, you know, we may build in the fashion part of it, where we're restructuring clothing for individuals and other companies, but it's primarily to look at creating commercial industrial product for, like, architectural building, insulation, acoustic remediation, that kind of product. What else? Again, I keep focusing on remanufacturing and restructuring. And I think in terms of like systems, invention, and different forms of investment, you know, we really, I know that in this system, I can't be an entrepreneur in a system that's not worker-owned. I can't move forward in any other way. And I also want to make sure that it's community invested. I think that that's a huge new way of offering direct public offering to community members to own different companies that belong to all of us. And I'm really, oh, well, we're going to talk later about equipment, right? Okay. All right, I'm done. Thank you.
All right. Yeah, me. Okay. I'm Marvin McWilliams, owner of Valley Oak Wool and Fiber Mill. And let's see here. I guess I'll say that I'm from Woodland, California, and I studied art at California College of the Arts and was a textiles major, and pretty much assumed I would not be using my degree. Like, what can you even do with that? And then moved home, and hey, there's a wool mill in my town, Woodland, California. It was YOLO Wool Mill at that time. Started working there 10 years ago, learned everything on the job, and then that mill closed down a few years ago, and then a couple years ago, I opened it back up under the name Valley Oak Wool Mill. And yeah, I really never really thought that would happen to me, but that's me. And yeah, I do everything myself. It's a full mill scouring to yarn. So yeah, that's the plying frame, a roving frame where the yarn is spun. Oh yeah, I do have a scouring picture. And yeah, okay. Yeah, that's me. Hey.
So, hi, I'm Sara Gilbert. My husband and I own a Mendocino Wool and Fiber. We're based in Ukiah in Mendocino County. I've been fascinated by textiles my whole life, and I've been researching clothing and clothing construction since I was a teenager, and knitting and wanting to do something, but I didn't really know what. And at one of the first symposiums, my husband came up with the idea of like, hey, maybe we should have a wool mill. And then, yeah, we kind of just ran with it after that. So as a mill, we strive to help out ranchers and make sure that we're helping them with anything from networking to breeding to making sure their wool clip is a good one. And yeah, we have a great team at our mill, and we spend a lot of time thinking of ways to do better and grow and use up all the ability that we have to make local product. Yeah.
Thank you. All right. Hiroko, can you take us through how discarded clothing within the systems that you're familiar with in the Bay Area are managed? And what in that system have you been most fascinated by in studying these waste streams? And we can also, if you want to add in, what new technologies are you excited about related to the waste as you're seeing it? But first, take us through the waste, Maury, and, like a little bit about that.
So I don't know if you came across, I had a handout that I printed up on the life of a T-shirt, so I think I'm going to just stick to T-shirts. I think they're over here on this table. But basically, Americans throw out about 80 pounds of clothing a year, and it equates to about 200 T-shirts in weight sometimes. And what we don't realize when we donate to Goodwill and other charities like that is that 60% of their waste ends up in bales, which I'm sure you've seen. Those are like 1,500 pounds. And those are sold off. There's a company in Oakland that I'm talking to now in terms of potential partnership and co-ownership that, I can't mention the name of it, but they have a facility in Los Angeles. And I dragged my kids down to LA one time to see their facility because they have 4 Quonset huts that are 100 feet long, stacked high to the top, 5 layers high of those 1,500-pound bales, and 5 rows in with just enough space for a forklift to run through with another 5. So imagine 4 of those, 100-foot-long Quonset huts filled with those bales. And so I asked the owner, so how long does it take for you to get through this inventory? He's like, 4 months, 3 months? And I was like, what? That's fast, because what they do is they cut the necks and the sleeves off the T-shirts and mostly the garments. Oh, wait, I forgot a step. They send those bales to Pakistan to be sorted, and then they're returned. And then they cut the sleeves and the necks off. And they do that in Oakland, too, in their 30,000 square foot facility. And what they do in Oakland is they fill up 4 of the extra long tractor trailers or semis a week with the remnants, with the offcut. And then they ship them to LA, where they dump them in LA and the landfill's there because it's cheaper to dump in LA than in Alameda County. So we don't have incentives in landfill, systems to encourage people to do something else with their garbage. So, my idea was to go in and take the cotton that's cut out and shred it and make it into other material. So that's evolved completely into other areas as well. But that's sort of what's happening right now.
And the technology piece, do you want to say anything to what's generally exciting to you
Yes.
about how you can be assisted by technology in the...
Yeah, because I sometimes look back, and I look at my whole life now. As I keep getting older, there's more to look back at. But, when I did this drawing 4 years ago, we didn't have the technology that's available now in Belgium and in Sweden that allows a garment to be sorted to the speed of 1 garment per second. It would even require robotics to actually manage that, because human beings are at around 4 or 5 seconds per garment. But this equipment can actually, just keep in mind that in the recycling business versus like incinerating and landfill businesses, you create 85 to 1 jobs. So that's ultimately my key goal, is to create like really good, sustainable, livable jobs or living wage jobs and ownership opportunities. But so that equipment then can run through with a garment and say, oh, this is 98.6% cotton and 1.4% lycra in that, quick second. Then there's equipment in Sweden now that can, and this is the biggest stumbling block to recycling textiles, is that all of our fabrics, even the ones that are wool, sometimes the smart wool is fiber that's bound around a polymer. This equipment in Sweden now can actually take fibers and extract the polymer fibers. That's key. So now I'm more than thrilled, because now the timing is right for us to actually be able to do something. So, and the reason we're including an innovations lab is that we don't have as many end markets that we'd like to see to be able to use all of this glut of textiles and fibers that are going to be available to us.
So respinning and shredding for felt are both possibilities.
Yes, so your system needs to get set up very quickly at the same time so that we can have the spinning capacity locally here.
To spin the wool that's extracted and shredded and
natural
respun.
fibers that are extracted, right.
Okay. So think about all the natural fibers that might still be blended. Maybe you didn't buy them here. And to be able to go through that machine and then take the natural fiber from that and have Markale and Sara set up to be able to have recycled content from urban waste streams that produces a yarn that is eliminating that pressure off of the current system, and could also take virgin materials, it sounds like, and blend that. So that's where the intersection between your businesses could be, sounds like.
I mean, I think we'd have to look at the fiber, get into the details of that, but yeah, it'd be great to have the opportunity to actually try it out.
Cool. Thank you, Hiroko. So Markale, can you describe who the mill is serving right now in the community, including sharing it with us the types of wool that you prefer to process, maybe the breed, micron count, if that seems relevant, and the types of products that you've been making?
So the mill serves a lot of the vendors that you have probably visited today, Marley, Bodega, Colleen, Sara in the other room. So a lot of my customers are Fibershed producers, kind of all around the region. Most of my customers, I'd say, are kind of in this area, people that have sheep that are willing to pay to get it processed. I mean, so I'm in Yolo County, so most of the wool grown in Yolo County doesn't come to my mill. They want to shear the sheep, get it into a bale, send it off to Texas as fast as they can. They don't care about the wool. So most of my customers are in this area of people that maybe have 1 or 2 sheep and either want to use the wool themselves to knit a sweater or to sell in a local yarn shop or online, however they want to do that. Typically, I'm getting a lot of, more and more recently, a lot of Navajo churro wool. I get a lot of Wensleydale wool, Corriedale, yeah, I'd say those kinds of breeds. More of the coarser breeds, because I lost the carding machine. When it was YOLO, she had 2 cards, and now I only have 1 card. So I don't have the carding machine that can do fine wool. So I have to kind of accept wool that's more of like high 20s micron to somewhere in the 30s micron. So yeah, those are like the softest stuff that I feel comfortable producing is like the Corriedale and maybe like a single coat Shetland type of a wool. And then, let's see here. where does the wool go? So is that what
I think
you
you described that if the wool is not going to you or Sara right now, that there's a baling process, and if the commodity markets like hadn't crashed this year, those markets would have allowed that wool to maybe go, best case, to Texas to be washed at Bullman's, it sounded like, or overseas.
Yeah, and I'm pretty sure I've heard a lot of it is actually thrown away too. So, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. And then for Sara, it's the same question. It's about like understanding how this system of manufacturing is evolving, and you've taken on a certain type of wool or fiber, I would say texture and micron count that you're focused on. And I wonder if you could describe what that looks like and some of the blends that you're working with right now too.
Yeah, so we kind of process the other wool that Markale can't or doesn't. With her machines, our machines are much finer carding cloth, and so we can do next to skin soft wool, and we can do shorter lengths of wool. We can also, we've been working with blending. So we take a lot of locally grown targhee and merino and other, blends like that, and we make them all the way into yarn. We also have started blending them with hemp and with flax, partnering with Chico Flax, and working with Fibershed to see what we can do with local, the idea of local hemp and wool blends. Yeah.
Thank you. And then back to this idea about, did you want to talk about Matt's work at all on keeping the flock diversity and a little bit about the history of the region related to the quality of wool and how you and Matt are serving at a deeper level in some of that work?
Yeah, so my husband grew up in Mendocino County, and he's been shearing sheep since he was 13, and he kind of over the time learning how to shear and shearing for more and more people, saw people not have as good of quality wool while markets were diminishing here. And he saw like lots of people who had great merinos start just throwing whatever ram in and getting whatever, because now they were not getting money for their wool, they were just using them to graze and for the meat. So that's kind of when he came up with the idea of like, well, why isn't this working? Well, we're sending stuff to China, we're not getting paid for it, so let's see if we can use some of it here. And then throughout that time as well, we've also had, ranchers who have moved out of the area and needed to like move their flocks to somewhere else, or they were going to go to auction. And so last year there was a flock that Jean Neer, a lady who worked on breeding beautiful colored merinos for like 50 years, when she died and her son moved out of the area, her flock was needing to be rehomed, and Matt looked around and found some place for that flock to go. So we still have access to that amazing flock that's been around for 50 years. And yeah, he goes everywhere because he shears all over, and so he's always helping somebody find a ram or rehome lambs, or yeah.
A semi-formal way of keeping wool quality up, and it's a service that you're not necessarily getting identified for doing, but it's so integral for us to keep the quality of wool in the region balanced between the coarse and the fine. Yeah, so thank you for that. And then we're going to go into a set of questions followed by the vision statement. So the second set of questions for all of you is, we'll start with Hiroko, because your business is in the collaboration and stakeholder building phase. You've run a lot of successful businesses. I love 25th Street Collective, and Fibershed was benefited so greatly from your presence in Oakland in that space, and those relationships continue to foster today. So thank you for what you did with 25th Street Collective. And could you just describe for us, within your business planning, how you want to see Inno Fabrics grow, and what do you functionally see as necessary to launch the project? Just letting the audience know. Again, it's like big partnership, right? So what are some things that you're ready to do like now to see it go?
Last week I happened to tour some spaces, and I've been casually looking in addition to the other space in Oakland. And ironically, I was shown the St. Vincent de Paul space that I had toured, 6 years ago.
Interesting.
And, they had their conveyor belts, the balers all set up, and we had created a smart sorting curriculum, actually. So we had one of our designers from the collective. She took existing garments and restructured them, and she did a video of how she goes to Goodwill and looks for fabrics like that, or for garments that would work for her line called Ghetto Goldilocks. And she's in Hawaii now. She's doing great. But we went to St. Vincent de Paul, and the people who were working there sorting had said that, oh, my grandmother used to sew, and they actually came to the collective, and they were just so enthused because we were building partnerships that way. What happens in these, a lot of these organizations is that even though they're national, each local chapter is really it's like a franchise. And so if the leadership changes, then that changes the relationships too. So the leadership changed there. And so we're looking for partners, and I just read about a new approach that the executive director of Goodwill in San Francisco has. And they're also looking at how can they evolve through this dying market, because what these entities used to get per pound in the global market for their waste bales was 42 cents a pound, and now it's plummeted to about 16 cents, and soon it's going to be even less. So that's why they're getting out of the business. So we're looking at, regional partners. We're looking at, we need to finalize certain aspects of our business plan and really strategize which entity we want to pursue for our investment structure. There are more and more, which is good in this field of community investment strategies, entities to choose from, but it's like, well, which one do I go with? So, and setting those up is quite costly too. So in a way, we're looking for seed funding, but really trying to be able to best evaluate which process to move forward with, because I want to do it right. Yeah. So, yeah.
Wonderful. Thank you. And Markale, you are up and running. So you and I had a couple of conversations very early on before you took on what Jane Deemer's equipment. And I just remember one phone conversation we had, and I'm wondering if you could just share a little bit about your efforts with traditional lending, like when you were really looking at turning this into your livelihood. You're a young manufacturer, and it's a very rare space that is so needed in our community. So we cherish your role. And I was very amazed that in the traditional lending sphere that you had some of the experiences you did. And I'm wondering if you could share a little bit about that.
You were amazed, like you were surprised?
I guess I was just more disappointed. I mean, maybe that's the word. Yeah.
I think we all were. Yeah, so I don't know, everybody told me before I started, oh, there's money out there for women that want to start business. Well, I haven't seen a dime of that money. Sorry. Yeah, where is it? I don't know. So, yeah, like I worked with somebody from the small business, SBDA, whatever that is, small business development, whatever, yeah. And we put together a business plan. She introduced me to like a few banks in town, and, I kind of would always get the answer like, I can tell you're very enthusiastic about what you do, but sorry. I'm like, okay, thank you. I really didn't get anything to start up, and I did apply for a grant and didn't get it. And yeah, the lady that was helping me, she was like, well, there's slow money and there's fast money, there's cheap money and there's expensive money. So like grants are slow but cheap, loans are fast but expensive, and still I didn't get any of it, but whatever. So, yeah, so it really was just like the people that bought the property and now own like everything that, they found me, like they were like, either get rid of all this machinery on our property, or we can work with you as far as setting up like an amortized loan between the two of us. They basically acted like a bank, so then now I'm just paying them, paying off the machinery to my landlords, and that's really the only way I could have gotten started. I mean, I don't see how any other door was going to open. I'd probably still be waiting for funding. So yeah. Yeah, was that the question?
That's a very clear answer. It reflects what I observed of the situation as well. And Sara, you and Matt, like, I guess, I don't know the track record prior to the DPO, but if you could just say, like, you went non-traditional because you had some experience that led you to understand that, like, you were going to have to look at this in a very different way to get funded. And you pounded the pavement hard for years. And you want to narrate what that was like?
That's a long story. Yeah, so we looked at traditional and high-risk loans, and because we didn't have a lot of experience in manufacturing, and because we didn't have a lot of, we didn't have a place to put it, we didn't have space, and we needed to develop it. We were not going to qualify for any traditional loans, and so we ended up, through our work with the Women Entrepreneurs Association in Mendocino County, which is since rebranded its name, but it used to be called West Company, they introduced us to the Economic Development Financing Corporation in Mendocino County. They work with small business high-risk loans, for non-traditional loans for people starting businesses that can't get all of the funding or the funding that they need through traditional means. And they were, at the time, getting ready to launch what they were calling a direct public offering, which was basically the opportunity for local non-accredited investors to be able to invest in a fund that EDFC would insure and hold, and then EDFC would work with small startups to disperse those funds to get things started. And there were 3 projects when we started the DPO that they were talking about funding out of this fund. And Matt and the then director of EDFC spent, 18 months, 2 years, fundraising, going all over, trying to make sure that trying to reach out to as many people as possible all over Northern California. And basically, you could, if you had a certain amount of money in savings, you could invest up to $1,000. And if you had a little bit more in savings, you could invest up to like $10,000 as a non-accredited investor, which you can't do as a non-accredited investor. You can't invest off of Wall Street legally. So EDFC ended up with Matt and I raising about $340,000 of local money, and we were the company that had a good, solid business plan and had started fundraising for equipment and stuff. So they lent us the money to build out the space and get through the design and permitting process with the city, and and give us startup funds, because the other part of the problem is you need startup funds that are operating funds and buying goods funds. It was.
And the direct public offering was, at that time, designed by lawyers in Oakland at Cutting Edge Capital. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. So that structure allowed unaccredited investors, including myself, many people in the audience, to take part in a community Main Street investment strategy. But it required, what I observed in the process over the years was just so much time going to farm-to-table dinners, the level of advertising, the amount of traveling and time that you brought your children into spaces to kind of talk about the DPO. Because if you disaggregate the investment strategy, it means you need many more people to invest, which means you need many more opportunities to meet those people who are your investors. So it ups the amount of time that you're traveling and experiencing and basically a marketing strategy. So you developed yourselves in so many other ways to even operationalize the DPO. I want people to think like DPO has many implications, I would say, for a family that's trying to raise capital. That's my observation.
It was definitely we all showed up all the time. But it was great that in many ways that it took that much, because now as, we've gone through the setup process and the startup process, starting with that good relationship with our community and the people that were interested in investing in local manufacturing, they've been really supportive, and they've been with us every step of the way, and they've helped us out. And the people that have when we have a question, we have a problem, they just show up, because it's not just our mill. We took out loans and we did an Indiegogo, and then everybody else stepped up and made it so that it happened. And we're still here. We're making yarn.
And our final question of the night, thank you all so much, is can each of you share for 2 minutes approximately your vision? So many of you seem to be at an inflection point, but just share what you would like your milling system to feel, look, smell, taste. What is that vision for you at this point? At the point you're on the road, on the journey. And actually, can we start with Markael and then go to Hiroko and Sara? Is that okay?
Sure.
Okay.
Gosh, let's see here. Well, there's a list, but I'd like my mill to not feel like it's running me. I would like to feel like I'm not beating my head against the wall. Don't cry. Just talking with Fibershed about getting more modern equipment that doesn't break down. But in all honesty, I feel like this summer I turned a corner and I'm not so afraid all the time. It's like paying rent is easier. And I'd just like, employees. I'd like, a business. I'm doing it myself, and it's hard, but it's good. I wouldn't want to be doing anything else. And definitely, I took a job at a mill in Arizona, and the mill owner was like, "Are you sure you want to start a business in California? It's so all the taxes and all this stuff." And I was just like, I'm positioned to do this. I've been doing this for so many years. All the people in the Fibershed, they're my customers. They know me. They've known me for years. If I didn't do this, who would? You guys were starting up, there's somebody else that would probably step in, but there's more work than either of us can do. So really we need more than just us. So anyway, I'd like, a mill that is running itself, and obviously I'll be there, but it's not only me. So I guess more modern equipment. Somebody else was telling me, when you're spinning yarn, right now I have to turn off the whole frame when one strand breaks, and she was like, "That's not how the industry works." And I was just like, "Really? That's how it's always worked for me." So a machine that keeps spinning, all the other bobbins are still going if one breaks, and I just stop that one and I fix it, and be able to crank out a product and get ahead and hire people, and that's the future.
Yeah, nice. Thank you. Hiroko, your vision statement.
I guess ultimately I would like to be out of business.
No more waste?
That there's a huge reduction in consumption, that people really understand what, how frugality can be fun, that there's soul regeneration along with soil regeneration, that there's true equity, not the kind that we just banter about. And, when I think of a snapshot of a facility, let's say, or a space that's keeping place, that's interactive with community, I see a beautiful, pristine, high-tech and also traditional tech interaction, with community members and with people who are working there. And I see it growing from here, this region, to LA, and then to the Portland, Washington area, and then ultimately Vancouver, and looking at the western region, and then planning my exit strategy to another country north of here, possibly. To wear more wool.
Wear more wool. Yes, might need to move north to wear more wool. Sara?
Yeah, starting a mill is it's not for the faint of heart. Yeah, so long term, we're starting to put together a really good team, and that's been a learning curve for sure. But our whole vision has been to have a community that's strong and produces things for itself, and has good jobs and has good relationships. And so long term, our vision is to have a mill that does that helps with that serves the region with fiber goods, and also creates good jobs, and also helps the community, the ranching community, grow a good wool clip, and that's efficient enough so that those goods are accessible to people who live here, not just one thing, but people can use them, and yeah, we'd like to be productive enough to make an impact. That means, we need to keep going. We need probably more modern equipment because, turning off the machine every time you need to fix something it's slow. Yeah. And, to compete with what's out there that's producing all of this waste, we can't stop every time we break something. Even if we're consuming less, there's a lot of people to clothe, and there's a lot of wool that's out there that's not getting used. And we can't handle it all with the machines that we have right now. We probably can't handle it all even with, yeah. Yeah, but that's where we're looking, is making an impact with the mill.
Production that makes an impact. Thank you. Thank you all so much. And I think that's a wrap. And if you, yes. We're the last parting words where we are about to launch a regional fiber manufacturing initiative. These folks have already been extensively interviewed, but there's a lot more interviewing to do. There's board positions we're filling right now, and this initiative will increase deal flow and make it easier for investors who want to come and work with us, for those investors to have a clearer understanding of what's on the table. Because the investment community right now, the table has not been easily set for them. They've had to work kind of hard. Both sides have had to work very hard to figure this out. And I think it's just a matter of let's set the table better and let's create more deal flow because we all want this. And so the RFMI will be launching early December to help do this economic empowerment work writ large, but starting with the 51 counties and into Southern Oregon as well. More on that later. Again, just thank you all for your presence and your participation. Have a beautiful night, and we'll see you next year, if not before.